In this video, what we're going to cover is permissions, how to change permissions to files and or directories, and how to change ownership of files and or directories using the CHMOD command or the CHOWN command. CHMOD change mode or CHOWN change ownership. So we will start with the CHMOD change mode, which sets the permissions of files and or directories. So I am logged in here as a user on this VM in his home directory. These are the files in the home directory, and the permissions for those directories and files are listed over here to the left, on the left side. So to break it down, the first slot out of these 10 spaces, it determines if it is a file or directory either by having the letter D that represents directory or being blank that represents a file. There are other letters that can be used to represent other files in the Linux operating system, but we are going to focus on just the D for directory or nothing for files. After that, the next 3 characters represent the permissions for the owner. The 3 characters after that represent the permissions for the group, and the last 3 characters represent the permissions for all other users. So the permissions for files and directories are shown over here to the left side. The permissions are read, write, and execute for either a file or directory. These permissions can be changed to either all 3, to 2 out of the 3, or to 1, either read and write, or just read, or just write, or for some strange reason, just execute. If we take a look at this file called newresults.txt, this file, the owner has read-write permissions, the group has read-write permissions, and all others have read permissions. So if we want to change the permissions to this particular file, we will use the change mode command. But before we use that, let's take a look at the help menu. Here are a list of arguments you can use when you use the change mode command. I would like to bring to your attention the capital R argument, which is necessary when you're dealing with directories. If you want to change the permissions for files and directories inside a parent directory, you have to use the capital R argument to have those changes take effect to all files or directories within that parent directory. For example, let's clear the screen. In the videos directory, which is probably empty, the owner, which is the user, and the user's group has read, write, execute, and members of the group can only read if there are any files or directories in here. If we add the write permission to this directory and we do not make it recursive, when there are files created or other directories created within this directory, by default, it will not come with the write permission. So with that being said, let's change the permissions on this directory. We're going to do it recursively to add the write permission to the group. When it comes to the read, write, and execute permissions, they have number representations. The read permission represents 4, the write permission represents 2, and the execute permission represents 1. The number representation for permission is read equals to 4, write equals to 2, and execute equals to 1. So if we want to change the permissions on this directory using the numbers, we have to know 1, which section we want to affect, and 2, we have to also document the permissions that are already there that we're not going to change. For example, read, write, and execute equates to 7. 4 plus 2 plus 1 equals to 7. Read and execute equals to 5. 4 plus 1 equals to 5. And read and execute equals to 5. Therefore, this directory's permissions is 755. If we want to issue the write permission to the group, which the number representation is 2, and there is already read and execute, which equates to 5, we know that 5 plus 2 is 7. So therefore, we have to document the owner, the group, and the others if we're going to use a number system. For example, use a sudo command. The command is change mode. It's a directory, so we're going to go recursively with capital R. 7 represents the owner. 7 represents the group, but they already have 5 and we want to add the right, so we have to add the other 2. We have to add 2 more to it. And 5 is already depicted for the others, so we just keep that at 5. And we give it the name, the source that we want to affect. Put in the password, and if you take a look, the permissions now for this directory is for the owner has read, write, execute. Others has read, write, execute. And correction, the group has read, write, execute. And others has read and execute. So we added the write permission to the group using the change mode command. Clear the screen. Take a look at it again. If we want to remove the write permission that we just added, we can use the same number system by just assigning the number representation of permissions for each group that we want to assign. But this time we're going to change it using the letter representation and the group that we want to affect. So the command is still going to be sudo change mode. We'll use capital R again. We want to affect the group and we want to take away the write permissions and the name and the source videos. If we look, the write permission is now gone. I will also give you an example of how we can affect multiple sections using either the number system or the letter representation. So let's take a look at the results.txt. The owner has read, write permissions only. The group has read, write permissions only, and others has read permissions only. We are going to give everyone read, write, execute permissions for this particular file using the number system. So the command is going to be change mode. It is a file, so we don't have to make any effects recursively. And we want the owner to have read, write, execute. We want the group to have read, write, execute. And we want to have others to have read, write, execute. Rename the file. And if we take a look at it, now everyone has full permissions for this file. The reason the file went from white to green is because it became an executable file by giving it execute permissions. And if we just want the owner to be able to access this file, the owner being this user right here, we can use the same number system to remove the read, write, executes for group and for others. So let's go up. And we want the owner to have read, write, execute. So we want the group to have no permission. So we use a 0 and the same for others, 0. Then we just put the name of the file. Take a look. Everything is gone except for the owner permissions. And we can do this also by using a letter representation of the group that we want to affect. So now we are going to change permissions for the same file. We are going to take away the execute permission from the owner or the user. We are going to give read and write permissions to the group and read permissions only to the others using a letter representation of the section that we want to affect. So it'll be sudo change mode. And we are going to affect the user. So to take away the execute, we can either say minus execute, or we could just say equals read write. Let's do the minus execute first. The minus execute, comma, we can do the group, we can equals read write, or we could add read write. And for others, we can add or equals, let's do the add read only. Space and the name of the file. Once we take a look, we will see that the command, the user, we took away the execute permission, which is just no longer here for the user. The group, we just want them equals to have read write only. So they have the read write. And I use the plus symbol to show that equals and plus, they're synonymous. So the others did not have any permission, so we added the read permissions to them. The difference between the plus and the equals is the equal sign represents all the permissions that you want that particular unit to have. and the plus is adding the permission to that particular unit. For example, keeping with these permissions, if we want to add the right permission to others, we can use the plus W, or we can use the equal sign RW. So that is how you use the change mode command. The change ownership is used to change the owner and group of files, directories, and links. We're only going to focus on the files and directories in this video. The owner and group owner of files and directories are listed here right next to the permissions. You will always see a name that represents the owner and a name that represents the group. The owner and group permissions are set by the permissions listed over here. For example, this particular directory, this group, has only read and execute permissions, which means any member of this group can go into this directory and they can read any file in there. They will not be able to edit any file in there. But this owner, they have full permissions for that directory, so they can read, go into, and edit files in there. And others represent anyone who is not a member of this group and who is not a owner. So basically anyone else who has access to the machine. They have the right to read any file within this directory, and the execute permission allows them to go inside a directory. So if we want to change either the owner or the group, we have to use the change ownership command. So for this public directory, we are going to change the group ownership to another group that is on this VM. So we are going to cat at C group file, and we have a bunch of groups in here that are all groups based on users that are created. So we are going to create a group for the purposes of this lesson. So now we have a group called practice. So we are going to change the group owner listed here to the practice group. Now, there are several ways you can affect this change to either the owner or the group. So for this particular command, since this is a directory, if we want to affect everything within this, if we want to affect the permissions within this directory, we have to use the capital R argument, which represents recursive. Two ways we can make this change. We can list a change we want to make. We can either list the user with a colon and then the group and the name of the file, or we could delete the user and just leave the colon, just place a colon and the name of the group to make the change to the file. So we're going to do it this way first and see what it looks like if we do it the other way. So if we hit enter and we take a look, we will see now that practice is the group owner of this directory. Let's take a quick look at the CHOWN help menu. The beginning of the help menu gives us an example of the syntax that you can use. So it has a command CHOWN, options, which represent any of the flags that you may need. Then you have the owner, followed by a colon, and then you have the group, and then the file or directory that you want to change. So that's an example on how you can make that change. And let's make a change to another owner and another group using the colon with both owner and the group. So it's a directory. We want everything to be recursively. We use the capital R. Let's say, let me get a name of our owner. So in order to make the change to the owner and the group, we're going to use this sudo. We're going to run sudo change ownership. It's a directory, so we can use a capital R flag argument. Then we're going to list the owner. We have an owner on this machine named student, colon. We are going to go back to the original group. We are going to list the directory. Take a look. Public is now owned by the student user, but the group owner is back to the original group owner. And keeping with the examples, sudo CHOWN, capital R for the directory. If we want to list the owner only, put a colon. We don't have to list the group if you're not going to change the group. Do a space and the name of the directory or file, and that changes just the owner alone. The same thing applies to a file. We have this file results.txt. We are going to change the group owner to that file. We use a shortcut by not listing the owner since we're not changing the user owner. List the group, list the file. We do not need the capital R argument because it is not the directory. And that will change the group owner of this file. The arguments for change ownership command that we can use are listed here. If you want to get an output a diagnostic for every file processed, or if you want to suppress most error messages or report only when a change is made, we can use those arguments. So let's try it on a directory that has more files in it. Let's move into the temp directory in the root file system. We have this, the directory is not here that I thought was here. So let's go with sudo cp flag. Let's do recursive verbose listing. We're going to go to this same user, another host machine. That directory I'm looking for, I think is here. We're going to bring it to the user's home directory. Okay, so let's move back to the user's home directory. I didn't put it in the user's home directory. I put it under the home directory. So let's move to okay. So the directory here is owned by root and the root. Let's take a look into that directory. And there's a whole bunch of files in this directory. Let's move back one level. And so now we're going to affect the ownership of this directory recursively with the CHOWN command. And we see that if we go into that directory, we'll see that everything here is owned by root. So we are going to go back one level and we are going to change the ownership to the owner and the group using the CHOWN command. Let's clear the screen. So we see test1 directory owned by root, group, and root user. So sudo CHOWN, we're going to need a capital R argument. We are going to make the owner, user owner. We are going to make the owner as Brom, and we are going to assign it to the student group, correction practice group. And it's just the test1 directory. And if we take a look, test1 is owned by this user and this group. And if we go into test1, take a look. So is everything in here. So the changes took place recursively within inside a directory. So this user or any member or anyone that has an account on this VM that is a part of this group can access these files and directories. Now notice anyone that has an account on this VM that does not have access to that is not a part of this group cannot have access to these files or directories based on the others permissions listed. It just says read. So if we go back one level and we look at the permissions, others cannot even go into the directory because there is no execute. Now, I could log in as someone else, but since I'm in the user's home directory, it would not allow me to access a home directory. If we look at the home directory, only the user has read, write, execute. So others cannot read, write, execute. So let's show you how that works. This user, along with all users, don't have any others permissions. So I'm going to issue change mode flag capital R argument to give others read and execute on that directory. So now others should be able to go into the directory. So I'm going to switch user to student. We are in the student's home directory. So we're going to move back one directory in the home directory. So we are going to try to go into this user's directory, but because there is no permissions for others, he will not be allowed to do so. So we change into Ansible, permission denied. But this user has read and execute permissions. So others have the ability to move into that directory because of the execute command. So let's try to cd into sbrown. He's allowed to get in. Now he can see all the files that are in here. And the execute command is on this directory. So he can also go into this directory. So let's log out. And let's change the permissions to this user's home directory again. Change mode. We're gonna others minus execute. And we take a look. Now there's a read, but there's no execute. And we're gonna log back in again as student. So now we remove the execute permission from this user's others direct permissions. Let's see if we can change into that directory. You cannot change into that directory because the execute permission is gone. So keep in mind that when you're listing or issuing permissions to files or directory, if it is a directory, if you want someone to be able to go into that directory, they're going to need the execute permission. So that's going to conclude this video, and thanks for watching.